Mount Ararat at 4,630 meters altitude, Part 15. In the barge debris field, among many unknowns of this ship, there is one that resembles an arch-type structure, apparently having belonged to the ship. From Google Earth images, it appears of a huge size and taller than the ship's height. It did not come from the inside of the ship, but was placed over its outside hull and standing above it. Something that was attached to its hull, but on its outside. The area in this picture is what I call the barge debris field. The reason why I call it the barge debris field is because it comes from the barge structure area of the ship. Something like 65-70% of Noah's Ark is this barge-type structure, and it is the barge structure where most of the animals were kept. Something like 90% of the animals were kept in this structure, from my understanding of Noah's Ark from the Google Earth images. The rest in the superstructure area, and probably some under the front decks. The rest of the ship space was for storage. From Genesis chapter 6, we read that the ship had storage spaces, both for Noah and his family and for the animals. But unlike what one would imagine Noah's Ark as some boat-type, barge-type structure with a roof over it, the ship in the cavern, and especially its debris with these buildings-type structures, shows a ship very different from people's imagining what Noah's Ark looked like. Noah's Ark appears as a ship with buildings built over its roofs. The superstructure building, another building next to it, much smaller, this other building circular in shape. While the superstructure was to contain animals, the smaller building could have been a storage space, and the circular building, or what remains of it, most certainly is a storage building. That the circular building was used for storage, this I am absolutely certain, and I will explain the why of my being so certain that it is a storage building in the episode How to Measure Noah's Ark. Structures and buildings were once present over the roofs of Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark had buildings over its roofs, and these images show that the ship's roofs were occupied by buildings. The superstructure among these buildings, this building here, these buildings, this one here, and probably others present, but as debris of the barge debris field. Do we read of all these extras in Genesis chapter 6? Yes, as storage rooms, verse 21. But where the storage rooms were placed, we do not know. I will explain this in the episode How to Measure Noah's Ark. Some of you have probably attempted to measure the ship and found that the ship does not have those measures of Noah's Ark as written in Genesis chapter 6. I will explain this also in the video How to Measure Noah's Ark. The ship has a height at the barge structure of something like 14 meters, height taken from the barge width. The barge structure of Noah's Ark is standing up vertically, when instead it should be standing down horizontally. I understood the ship's height from its width, but here I am referring to the barge structure height taken from its width. The ship has more than one height and width. I will explain this too in the episode How to Measure Noah's Ark. The reason why the barge structure or the barge area is standing up when it should be standing down was probably caused from the ship's falls. The ship fell at least twice, and with each fall it hit the rock ground of two caverns. I believe that it was in the second cavern where the barge structure came off from the rest of the ship and stood up vertically. I believe it was the fall in this cavern that caused the barge structure to lift up. From these images from Google Earth, the ship is so huge that it covers most of the entire area of the cavern, and most of the front side deck with superstructure is laying over the rock wall of the cavern and hidden under its shadows on the ship's right. This is what probably caused the barge structure to detach itself from the superstructure, and since there wasn't enough room for the barge to fit inside the cavern, the barge structure sliding and falling inside this cavern, it detached from the superstructure and falling lifted itself up vertically. The barge structure appears to be made of sections joined together by some interlocking mechanisms, as in this picture that shows an interlocking mechanism over the barge structure, having the barge appear not as one single piece of the ship, but separate sections joined together through interlocking mechanisms. This would have the ship at its barge area as sections built separately, and then, once all sections were finished, they were then joined together. They're joining through interlocking mechanisms made of some metal, as in this image. This section here completely detached from the ship and stands over the rock wall of the cavern, above the ship on a higher height from it, and over the rock wall on its right. The evidence of a ship built in separate sections that were then joined together is in how this section presents itself. Both ends appear almost smooth and intact, with no or little breaking, as if the section broke off in a clean break, and not as if it was torn off. And even here, we see that same metal type thing sticking out of the hole on its bottom, as if something that was attached to it, which could have been another section of the barge structure. The idea is that of a ship assembled as a Lego construction, but each section of the barge structure built separately, and then once each section was finished, all sections were then all joined together through interlocking mechanisms, creating a single barge structure. And the bow it too appears detached from the front side of the ship, appearing it too as a piece attached through some interlocking mechanism. A ship built of this size already shows that it could not have been built only by Noah and his wife, his sons, and sons' wives, but would require many workers. But to build a ship like this, under this method of construction, where sections were built separately and then joined together through interlocking mechanisms or closures, a workforce of hundreds of people of specialized labor would be needed. This section here of the barge structure, its length is 21 meters. How could 4 men build this, carry this, lift it, to then have it joined to other sections of the ship? Or the barge structure was built by many workers, and among these engineers, or that the barge came out of the assembly line of a shipyard after having been manufactured in an industrial plant. But this would have Noah's Ark built on commission. The barge structure was ordered, and someone built it for Noah. This would be the likeliest explanation on how it was built. But industrial plants in 4000 BC, or even earlier. Metal was in use in the Neolithic. The knowledge of metallurgy was known. How far the peoples of that era had knowledge of metallurgy is the question. Maybe not our level of industrial plants, and not our foundry, but they did reach a high level of metallurgy. And the next episode you will see it, in case you have not yet seen it, through Google Earth. And they had machines.